Chapter 108 Expanding the Pantheon. Summary. Branding isn't just for the space crew. As Earth gets on board the branding train, those at UA must follow in the Six's footsteps and decide on their own godly image. UA's bi-weekly staff meetings were never Shota's favorite. In fact, his son would sometimes say, as Shota reluctantly dragged himself out of bed early, that they were the bane of his existence. Since UA somehow became one of Japan's leading groups for extraplanetary progress, adding another hour of conversation to their staff meetings, he was beginning to agree with the sentiment. Shota tuned back into the conversation. Managed to improve the efficiency of the fuel cell energy storage system by 24%, Power Loader said, concluding his update on his students' progress over the past 2 weeks. Like everything has been since the world confirmed the existence of aliens, progress was moving at a dizzying pace. That's very good to hear, Majima. Nezu smiled, pen rolling off paper with a slight flourish as he finished his notes on the section. Majima smiled. They're doing so well. I'm proud of them. His smile faltered, grin shrinking slightly. It still feels empty without the explosions. Nezu's smile turned sympathetic, but he continued on with the meeting. And on to our final point. As a result of new addendums made by the UN regarding all participating organizations in GEED, as well as countries in the UN, we at UA need to make some adjustments. What kind of adjustments? Snipe asked cautiously. Shota understood his hesitance. UA had been taking on more and more tasks and responsibilities the last few months, and some of the teachers were beginning to burn out. And while Nezu was working on hiring more staff, that didn't help them much in the interim. It's nothing taxing, Nezu reassured. After anecdotes from Midoriya, I brought up the success and potential applications of branding as a defense. Despite reassurances that Earth is not under threat from extragalactic forces, many were still concerned. This will be a time and cost-effective solution that already has the groundwork laid out. So, in accordance with new mandates, UA has been asked to set in place the brand we will use upon contact with outside sentients. There were murmurs from around the table. The business course teachers appeared to be quite intrigued by this development, while the general studies were more wary. Shota, of course, already knew of the rat's plan, as he'd been asked to recount all the relevant details he could remember. Wait, you said this applies to the countries too? A general studies teacher asked skeptically. I saw something about that online, but couldn't believe it was true. It is, Nezu said plainly. In fact, many world leaders and their citizens are excited about the prospect. While an official consensus has not yet been reached, the UN will decide on an official brand for Earth as a whole. From there, each country can branch off for a more individual branding faction. I've already heard that Greenland is thinking about letting their citizens vote on the country's image to help boost morale. Oh, Nimuri pipes in. I saw some chatter about that. It sounds like the people want to lean into some old pre-Quirk stereotype about them holding out the longest in plagues or something. Plague Corps aesthetics have seen a sudden uptake in the country. Without his consent, the image of officials arriving to a meeting at the UN dressed in plague doctor outfits flitted through Shota's head. He quickly pushed that thought into the ocean where it could drown in peace. While the decision is relatively recent, the internet appears to have been taken by the prospect and generated a plethora of ideas in a short time frame. Nezu agreed. Cryptids, fae, undead creatures, extinct beasts, wild men. There is no shortage of possibilities for countries to latch onto. Japan and UA, however, have been put into a unique position because of our students' actions. While Earth as a whole will be taking on the persona of powerful, godlike beings, Japan specifically has been assigned the faction of Eldritch creatures. As UA is part of GEED and has a strong tie to our six space-bound representatives, We have a responsibility to follow our students' lead and establish a minor pantheon of our own. It was just like Shota's problem children to make an offhanded decision about how they could best gain a reputation to become space pirates. He is still not over that. And somehow end up influencing the entire Earth. At this point, he'll be shocked if that's where their influence on Earth's affairs stops. Wait, does that mean I need to change to a spookier costume? Hazashi pouted. Though he was definitely playing it up, Shota could tell there was worry there. Hazashi had spent countless hours while they were at UA, crafting his hero persona to be exactly what he wanted, so to change it now would be short of heartbreaking. Wanting to chase away any anxiety surrounding the idea, Shota spoke up. The current costumes the kids are sporting are actually similar to your costume's design. As to be prepared for any event at any time of day, their hero costumes are also their everyday wear, and therefore comfort and practicality were needed to be kept in mind. Their intimidation comes from their actions and behaviors for the most part, though they have added some glowing elements to their costumes that supposedly will help with the eeriness. While some may decide to make minor tweaks to be more in line with their chosen domains, there is no reason why every hero here wouldn't be able to be terrifying enough as they are. Speaking of domains, all heroes are required to come to an after-school workshop I will be running later this week to craft the image they will show the universe when the time comes, Nezu declared, eliciting some nervous chuckles from the teachers at the prospect of spending so much time with Nezu. And next Monday, this task will be extended to the students participating in the Extragalactic Diplomat course. All you teachers who've taken the lead in our new Extragalactic program should pay close attention during the workshop so you can offer the best guidance for your class when the time comes. Shota sighed. He knew with Nezu being Nezu, this was inevitable. Every student from both first-year classes. When 1B, more specifically Monoma, found out 1A was all going to attend, they refused to fall behind them. It was a part of the program. The remaining diplomat class was a mix of mostly second-year hero students, a few business course students, a single support student, and just a handful of third years, taught by Hazashi. When every one of his students was taking the course, how could Shota not be the one to teach them? And Vlad had the same thought. Just thinking about the amount of chaos the assignment will bring him has him repressing a shudder. Soft chatter filtered through from behind the classroom door. Shota stood there for a moment, listening to their laughter, before he took a breath and opened the door. Just like they'd done since the second month of school, by the time he was standing at the podium, the class was quiet, sat at attention at their assigned seats. He nodded in approval before speaking to the class. You have a new assignment. Excited chatter began to bubble, but the class was silent when Shota began speaking again. Thank your classmates for this one. Their antics have led Nezu to convincing the UN that the best way to defend Earth and secure its place in space is with branding. Because your classmates are Japanese citizens, Japan and UA have been pushed to follow the brand already set out by your classmates. Much like with hero names, you will all be coming up with godly domains, of the Eldritch sort. This is a diplomat assignment, but I know you Hellions will be distracted all day with this, so I'll be swapping its time slot and hero law and ethics. Tenya's hand immediately shot into the air, held stiff and proper as always. Shota gestured for the boy to speak. Sensei, how is branding supposed to defend Earth? Terrans, as we're called in space, already have a terrifying reputation, and your classmates have been furthering this sentiment by, quite honestly, being themselves, Shota explained. His nephew seemed content with this, but some of his other students didn't. Kirishima raised his hand, but spoke without waiting for Shota to call on him. No offense, Sensei, but how can Mito or Uraraka be scary? Like, Bakugo, I get, but those two are cinnamon rolls. Shota pinched his brow. Do I have to remind you that they were two of the students that participated in your harebrained scheme to rescue Bakugo from the League? How Midoriya shattered his bones on a regular basis? Uraraka's match against Bakugo in the sports festival? Midoriya is truly one with the darkness, Tokoyami confirmed, Dark Shadow nodding along. Anyone who's seen Ochaku around a limited time sale would never call her a cinnamon roll, Sue added. Well, what about Mina? Ojiro asked. She can be a bit intense, but scary. Sero stared directly into the blonde's eyes with a worryingly blank look and said, Fake baby assignment. Moving past the distracted line of conversation and all memories of that melted monstrosity, Shota said, You'll have the next 50 minutes to brainstorm. You'll all be presenting after school at the start of the diplomat course before we move back to law and ethics. Get to work. The I'll be here for you if you need help went unsaid, and the class broke off into groups to discuss amongst themselves. He didn't bother to pretend to sleep, listening in on their conversations plainly. Okay, but Momo, yours is the most obvious, Jiro insisted. What? Momo asked. Shoji shifted one of his limbs into a mouth. Your name is God in the group chat. You basically are one. Momo blushed as Jiro spoke again. You're the god of creation. Sounds of agreement chorused from their little group. Kirishima's sigh brought Shota's attention to the other main bunching of students. I want to be the god of, being unbreakable, like my special move. But god of unbreakableness doesn't really have a good ring to it. Well, Sensei said it was like our hero names, so why don't you use that for your godly title? Todoroki offered. I think God of Protection fits you well, kiddo. So, you'd be God of Protection, the unbreakable god. I like that, Kirishima enthused. If you don't mind, I would also appreciate some assistance, Tenya said. I do not find myself drawn to titles such as God of Speed. Sero hummed. How about God of Regulation? Because, you're into rules and you have to regulate your speed. But that does not communicate my quirk readily, Tenya commented confusedly. No one said it had to, Sue pointed out. Tenya seemed to think on that for a moment before saying, I suppose you're right. In that case, I will be God of Regulation, the Swift God. Shota listened as more and more names were declared. God of Stealth, the Unseeable God. God of the Waters, the Reasonable God. God of Haze, the Control God. God of Darkness, the Shadowed God. God of Radiance, the Twinkling God. God of Balance, the Dual God. And so on, until it was time for their next class, and Shota had to leave. He'd admit, his class's brainstorming went a lot smoother than the teacher's. It became apparent rather quickly that some of his co-workers didn't have a creative bone in their bodies, which led to the first half of the session being filled with joke names, and names so bland that cardboard had more character. It was only after Nezu stepped in with his own suggestions that the ball really got rolling. His kids had proved more competent than a room full of pros in a matter of seconds. A rare smile tucked behind the folds of his capture weapon, Shota made his way out of the classroom. Notes. Godly titles. All Might, God of Peace, the People's God. Nezu, God of Gods, the Wise God. Aizawa, God of the Void, the Guiding God. 13, God of Black Holes, the Caring God. Midnight, God of Oblivion, the Pleasurable God. Present Mike, God of Radio, the Shouting God. Recovery Girl, God of Recovery, the healing god. Power loader, god of mechanics, the hands-on god. Cementos, god of construction, the steady god. Vlad King, god of blood, the coaching god. Snipe, god of accuracy, the reliable god. Tsukuuchi, god of truth, the knowing god. Izuku, god of the unknown, the fathomless god. Ochako, god of gravity, the gravitation god. Mei, god of chaos, the chaotic god. Katsuki, god of explosions, the explosive god. Denki, god of lightning, the electrifying god. Mina, god of acid, the acidic god. Tsu, god of the waters, the reasonable god. Shoto, god of balance, the dual god. Tenya, god of regulation, the swift god. Hitoshi, god of haze, the control god. Momo, god of creation, the unlimited god. Jiro, god of sound waves, the listening god. Sero, god of adhesive, the trapping god. Ejiro, god of protection, the unbreakable god. Aoyama, god of radiance, the twinkling god. Sato, god of the hearth, the consuming god. Higakure, god of stealth, the unseeable god. Ojiro, god of close combat, the honorable god. Shoji, god of senses, the observant god. Tokoyami, god of darkness, the shadowed god. Koji, god of the wild, the fauna god. All for one, destroyer of gods, soul stealer. Shigaraki, god of indiscriminate destruction, the dusting god. Toga, god of bloody death, the shifting god. Twice, god of copied forms, the doubled god. Dabi, god of cleansing flames, the scorched god. Spinner, god of fanatic followers, the devoted god. Kurogiri, god of swirling void, the transporting god. Stain, god of broken promises, the blood-soaked god.